Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to Pain to Passion Live. I am so thrilled about the amazing, beautiful guest that I have here today. I'm so honored to be able to speak with her. This is Marcie Alvis Walker. She is incredible. She's the creator of Black Coffee with White Friends on Instagram. Go check her out. If you don't follow her yet, you need to. I think I started following Marcie probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And your content has just been such a blessing. Like, I love your voice. I love your truth telling. You are such a gifted human being. And she has a book. If you're watching the video, it's right here. It's called Everybody Come Alive, a memoir and essays. And y'all, this book is so good. Every single one of you needs to go get a copy. I have not been this attached to a nonfiction book in a while because, I love my fiction and I read it at night, but this one I cannot put down. It is stunning. So without further ado, I would love for Marcie to introduce herself. Please tell us who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Hi, I'm Marcie Alvis Walker, and your introduction was so it was really just heartwarming. So thank you for that. I am a writer. That's just basically all that I am. I'm not an activist, not a DEI teacher, none of that. I'm just a writer who is a Black woman in this world. And I write a lot about what that has been like for me. Like you, I read a lot of fiction. So I was inspired by a lot of fiction when I wrote my own book. So I wonder if that might be why you're jiving with it. I really took a lot of pointers from writers that I love and adore. So when I'm not writing, I'm somewhere engaged in stories somehow. I'm reading usually a few books at one time. I'm reading articles. I'm watching documentaries, watching TV shows, watching movies, often doing reels on what I'm watching, if it's just unbelievable or silly or whatever. So I'm a story girl at heart. I love a good story. I was raised on them. I raised my kid on them. And it's been a complete joy to be able to put a story out into the world.
Well, you are a gifted storyteller, and I'm right there with you. I think stories are some of the most powerful tools that we have. I think story changes the world. And when you engage in someone else's story, or we get to hear someone else's story, your view of the world can be transformed as well. So I love that you're a story girl, because me too, all the way. And absolutely, you're such a gifted storyteller. Okay, let's talk about this book.
Yay,
and your
excited.
amazing life. I love your mother. She is a fantastic human being, and just all of what I love about how you described her was it's so complex and so nuanced. You don't just focus on, there's no black and white, like there's no good and evil. It's like, this is a complex human being, which we all are. But her love and her passion, and your love and passion for her, I just loved that. Can you tell us a little bit about your mother and even your grandmother and what that was like growing up between the two homes?
Yeah, it's really funny. A long time ago, I was going to do a blog called, it was called Heidi Go Lightly, Foxy Brown and Nada Go Walking. Because that's what when I try to describe my mom, I'm like, well, if you mix a little Foxy Brown, not the rapper, but the 70s icon character, and you mix that with Holly Go Lightly, that's my mom. She was raised in the South, raised in West Virginia during Jim Crow, didn't want any part of it, so got pregnant as soon as she could, and she made sure to get pregnant with a boy who lived up north. A lot of African-American families used to send, and probably still do, send their kids down south for the summer because the parents would be working during the summer. And this way you would go stay on that sharecropping farm, or, that farm town that your family grew up in.
Mhm.
And that's what my, not my biological dad, but the dad whose name I carry, the Alvis part of my name, that's what he would do every summer. And he actually had a whole different girlfriend, and my mom's told her friend, hey, I need to get out of here. I'm going to take your boyfriend.
Oh my goodness.
She was a lovely person, but she just was one of these women that just really knew what she was about, knew what she wanted, and set out to have that life. I don't think she ever truly achieved it. She also had a mental illness. She was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, but treated throughout her life for different disorders, from schizophrenia to bipolar to, I think even at one point people were thinking she was multiple personality, but late in life finally got a correct diagnosis that she was grateful to get, that she was schizoaffective. So that was my mom, and she moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and married the boy, moved to Cleveland, Ohio. She was 16 years old.
Wow.
And she had 4 more children, and I am the youngest. But the little difference is that the Alvis dad, the name that I carry, he was a very fair-skinned Black man. Many people on that side of my family passed. Basically, they got jobs claiming that they were white when they were actually Black. That's how fair-skinned for my dad, because it's the only dad I knew. My mom wanted a biological child who looked more like her and who was darker skinned, so she had an affair. And that man is my father. I never met him. And just, she just was a person who made these kind of rash decisions that I think would have happened regardless of any mental disorder. It was really, truly just the person that she was. Yes, she was she had a mental illness, but outside of that, even when she was well, she was quite the character. And so when they divorced, she didn't know what to do with 5 kids. So one by one, she took us to our paternal grandparents' home. The in-laws that didn't even like her very much. They actually really didn't like her. My grandmother really didn't like her. But my mother knew that they would take good care of us, and we would go to good schools. We would go to these white schools, and we would be one of the first families to integrate those schools. So my mom sent us there, and, never really considered any other option. It was that she didn't want to send us back to West Virginia, and I thank her for that. Nothing wrong with West Virginia, but my mom grew up in a small hill town called Boomer, West Virginia. So I'm very grateful that I didn't have to grow up in Boomer, West Virginia. But she thought my grandparents, who didn't have, my grandmother, who had never had children, she was my dad's stepmother, that she would take good care of them. And so my grandparents did. So those are the 2 worlds I come from, and what the book is about, me straddling this 2 different worlds, where a world where my grandparents, one who passed to work at the post office, an aunt who passed to work at AAA, were very light-skinned Black people who were very much into assimilating into white culture, white normative culture, not making any waves. They were proud of being Black. It's not that they weren't. It's just that when we were out in public, they expected a different they expected us to not cause any waves, to not wear our Blackness culturally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was the exact opposite. We would spend summers with her, and it was like, you know, you will only see Black people the entire summer. Why are you talking like a little white girl? My mother would say that to me often, those sorts of things. So it was a totally different experience that I had, one where Blackness was very much loved and in a very prideful way. Like it was like, we love being Black, we are proud of our Blackness. And one where my grandparents loved being Black, but it was very hidden, and there were secrets, and there were protocols to how we should behave in public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the story that you weave about straddling these two worlds is just so moving, which I know I've said that already, but like you tell this story, for example, you tell the story of you're this little girl that's like super confident, like you're into yourself. And I love it. I love it because I have a daughter who's 7, and she'll just stand in front of the mirror sometimes and be like, do you see how cute I am?
I hope that never goes away.
I know,
never.
It's amazing. So I'm like picturing this like miniature Marcie looking in the mirror, just like, yes, I am all that. Like, I love it, as every child should feel. And then you suddenly have your eyes open to this world of racism that you didn't understand before then, when you and your family sit down to watch Roots. Like Roots comes on TV, like everybody in the country's watching it. And I think you said you were 7 when you watched it.
I think I was 7. I'm an older girl, but so let me just explain to the kiddies out there. There was this time where things came on the TV, that was it. Like you had to watch it.
Right.
When it aired, there was, not everything would go into syndication and reruns. Very few things did. So the whole entire world, if there was a blockbuster thing that was happening or some really big deal show, we were all watching it at the same time. So there were no spoiler alerts. You didn't have to worry about talking about a show, because if someone didn't see it, people would ask you. Like, I didn't get to see it because they would never know when they would get to see it again. This was before videos that we could buy. It was ancient times. So when Roots came out in 1978, I think it was, the world stopped. Everyone was watching this miniseries. It was on for 7 consecutive nights or 8 consecutive nights, something like that. But it was a very big deal. Everyone who was anyone in Hollywood that was a TV star in Hollywood was part of that show. So you're seeing, like, I had loved the Brady Bunch and always dreamed of having a dad like Mike Brady. And then I'm seeing the same Mike Brady, because I'm 7. So I'm thinking of him as Mike Brady, and he's an enslaver. And as a kid back then, I also tried to explain in the book, there was no language. There was no culture for how we talked about race. So there was no like, oh, this is a microaggression. Oh, we need more representation. There were no hashtags. There was no Black Lives Matter. There was none of that. Black Girl Matter, none of that existed. I had never even heard the word intersectionality. That was something I'd never heard of. So there was this very loud narrative of race happening, but this quieter narrative that had no language.
Which is it's so telling and so fascinating to think about. It really isn't that long ago, but the language has changed so much. And here you are, this little person, like I could feel it in my body. You're telling this story. Like, I'm not Black. I will never have an experience like this. However, hearing about the traumatic response that your body had to this, I was just so moved for that little girl, and how like you just went back upstairs and went to bed. There was no conversation about it.
Right.
No one talked about it. No one asked you how you felt, but it was like your whole world was like suddenly flipped upside down. And
Right.
not only that, but you went back into like a school setting, and all the white friends, all the white people had seen the show too. And it was being weaponized against you in a way that you'd never experienced before. So it's like they had language to use to bully you, but you had like no language with which to identify yourself and kind of fight back, even linguistically. Just that was so complex and challenging for you.
Yeah, and something that didn't make it into the book was that I knew I was Black before then, and I knew that that was a problem for some reason. But I didn't know what was the source of the problem.
Right.
I just knew when I went to this when I was taken out of the all Black school and put into this all white school, it was explained to me that some kids might be mean because I was Black. But that was it. That was the only reason, because you're Black. And so for me, I had this very layered reasoning for that. There was this colorism happening in my family where people who were lighter skinned were more privileged than the people who were darker skinned, and I was the darkest in my family. So I thought it was, oh, it's because I'm so Black, because I'm so dark skinned. And I thought my sisters and my brothers were having this different experience, which wasn't true at all, that we were all having a racial experience, but it just never was discussed that, or why that was, or the history around that. It was just like, people won't like you because you're dark. And that's how I interpreted it. So my very first day of school, I had a little boy say something to me. He said something, I don't even know what he said, but I ended up tying him to a chair when the teacher wasn't looking with a rope, with a jump rope, and not letting him go, like holding on. And I got sent to the principal's office the very first day.
Oh my gosh.
At my new school. And the principal was this lovely man, and stayed connected to our family through the years. And his name was Principal Schultz. And he said, you cannot fight everyone. And you're going to have a lot of people say terrible things to you, but you don't pay them any mind. That's basically what he said.
Wow.
So we were in a world where the adults didn't have the language. Black people didn't have the language. White people didn't have the language. But we were all watching Roots, right?
Yeah.
And we were all witnessing things that were happening in society without any language or any way of talking about it. And it was also during the time of everyone being colorblind, because that was the best that you could hope for, is that someone would not acknowledge your color in an effort not to discriminate against you, which is terrible, that was the best that we could hope for, because it was thought that if I see your color, then I have to discriminate against you. There was no nuance there. So as a little kid, I think at the end of my book and the acknowledgements, I acknowledge all those children I went to school with. I forgive them because they didn't have the language or the skills or the knowledge. And I didn't either. And so they couldn't get to know me because they were probably going home and being told either stay away from me because I was too dark, too Black, I was a Black girl, or not to pay attention to my color, to be colorblind. So kids were being taught one or the other thing, probably, in white homes. And in my home, we just didn't talk about race, period. Like we had to talk about us as Black people being safe in the world. Like I received the talk of which neighborhoods pulled over more Black people, where to be more careful when you were out, how to act when you were out, how to speak to a white person, how to walk in a store and not have your hands in your pocket, not be digging in your purse, not be carrying a lot of bags because they'll think that, like, so I had all that kind of talk. I never had any kind of education about what racism was, how it had endured in the country, and why we were carrying it around the way that we were.
Yeah. Wow. It's just a lot. And I think that's what we all need to continue to recognize is like, it's still a lot.
Yeah.
And just even because you're mentioning all of these other conversations like that you did have about where you can go more safely, keep your hands out of your pockets, like all of these things, like even that coming from my perspective is just like so horrible that you even have to have those conversations. But for you, even the way you just said it, it's like, oh, that's just like the normal stuff. And that stems from the racism that you didn't understand. Nobody understood, especially as a kid, like you didn't understand where it was stemming from and all of that. It's still a flower that bloomed from racism, is that you have all of those conversations. I think like just what I want my audience to hear is that normal also is traumatic and shouldn't exist, but it's become necessary, right?
Right.
It's a necessity just to keep you alive, like keep you safe. And that's still the reality today.
Yeah.
All the Black children still have those conversations today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I really appreciate you sharing all of that because it's really helpful and eye-opening, and like you don't owe us any of this, but I'm just so grateful for your willingness to share all of this narrative. I wanted to read this quote because it just popped out to me, and you can give me your reflection on it. How do you keep your head lifted when race is a tragically complicated emotion more than a fact?
Yeah. I've always felt that race is more about what people feel about a certain group of people than it is about the fact about a certain group of people. And that's really what I mean by that. It's more that people feel a certain way about Black people or white people or Indigenous people or Asian people. Like they'll have a feeling about an emotional feeling that's really not based on fact. It's usually based on a stereotype or some rumor that got really just out of hand. And so it's really hard to deal with race as a little kid when it's more about people's feelings. Like I've had so many times when a kid said, I can't invite you to my party because you're Black. And my mom doesn't feel that it's right. Well, I can't change. I can tell her a million reasons why I'm certainly not going to harm anyone's party by being there. And no one's going to turn Black because we all ate from the same cake plates. That's just not going to happen. But what I can't do is I can't change that mother's feelings. Or when it comes to interracial dating, I cannot change the way that people feel about interracial couples. I cannot change the feeling about that. I can certainly point out the fact that there's very little difference in us DNA wise. Like, it's so minuscule. The difference between the DNA between a white person and a Black person it's not even worth mentioning. Like, we are the same, we're just human, but I can't change your feeling. I can tell you all the facts. So race is so much more about feelings than it is about any facts. Because just recently today, I heard a man talking about how the reason that he's in Florida is because he wanted to be in a place that didn't believe in systemic racism, that would not uphold the idea of systemic racism. And his whole thing was, there's racism, but it's not systemic. And his whole reason for saying it wasn't systemic, he's like, well, show me an institution that's racist. It's like, well, that's odd, because that's nuance. That's just you playing semantics, because you can also cannot show me an institution that's not racist, because institutions are things that people create and people make. And so he just couldn't see it. But if I said, well, how do you feel about the fact that there are so few Black doctors in the healthcare field and the mortality rate for Black people is so much higher? What do you don't think that has anything to do with any kind of systemic racism that comes from having separate hospitals in Jim Crow times, and also the stereotype of Black people being stronger, used for experiments, all that kind of thing. And that to me is a deeper question for him, because what it gets at is then if you don't believe that there's systemic racism, then you honestly have to believe that there's just something wrong with Black people, that's the reason why Black people have never been, that we've only had one Black president. That's the reason why they don't have the same jobs that white people have. That's the reason why their communities don't look, a poor Black community doesn't have the same advantages as a poor white community. That's why there's schools with it. You would really have to come to the conclusion that the reason that there aren't that many classic books by Black people is because Black people just weren't great writers. And that's about your feelings, because if you take systemic racism out of publishing, out of housing, out of education, then the ownership has to be that Black people just aren't capable. And that's a ludicrous idea, that a whole group of people, just because their skin color is darker, that's the only DNA difference, that they somehow are lacking in some way. And I'm sure this guy, I would hope, never sat and thought about it like that. I think, like, he was like, of course Jim Crow was terrible, but that was long ago. The idea that somehow certain laws being passed changed everything. Well, it didn't change people's opinions or feelings. It just changed what people were able to do and not to do. And we are now seeing what happens when the highest court in the land takes away that protection, because then people can just base things on their feelings. And because we live in a colorblind society, a lot of times people will say that they'll be doing it out of some sort of color blindness. They don't see color, but yet time and time again, their preference is anyone who's not Black. So yeah, that's that feelings versus fact thing.
Yeah, that was so well put. And I've never heard that explanation for systemic racism put like that, but it's so clear when you say it in the way that you did. So I very much appreciate that. I mean, ultimately, at the end of that whole conversation is like, okay, so systemic racism doesn't exist, then you're probably like me, that guy. I'm probably racist.
Yeah.
Because that it's the feeling that there's something inherently wrong with one type of person that's not wrong with you.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's not wrong with people who are like you. And I
Yeah.
think we just see it a lot, but people would never dare to say it out loud. But I've been in those rooms with where people forget that I'm Black. Like that's happened so many times. I've been in a room with all white moms who will suddenly say something about a particular all Black community that they're going to serve, particularly as Christians growing up in the Christian faith. And then they'll say something really derogatory that's not a slur, but, you know, something like, well, I just don't know how they live like that. And it's just kind of like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean they as in their social economic status, how they live like that in that way? Or do you mean because they're all Black that you believe that this is something that is more with Black people than it is with other people groups? So it's one of the things I wish we'd done better with talking about race is that we hadn't made it so intellectual, because it's just really right. It's just commonly right in front of our faces, just based on how we live and the services that we engage in and the communities that we live in and the books that we read and the books that are sold and the shows that we watch. It's so like in our everyday, it's the yeast in our bread. And yet we tend to like make it this very like, well, you have to study. You don't really have to study the history. All you got to do is just look around. We are a very segregated society, and it's very unequal. And either the opportunities are equal and Black people just are lazy, can't do it, incapable, not enough education, whatever those reasons are, or there's not enough equality, there's not enough equity. It's one or the other. And common sense would say it must be equity. And we do it in other ways. We're able to do it with women. If you ask most people who have a problem with systemic racism, if they believe that women have less advantages than most men, they will agree with you. They'll say, well, yeah, but then they'll attach it to, but there's a reason for that. And it'll be about their feelings about women. So we really are more in our feelings about one another than we are dealing with any kind of facts.
Yeah. Yeah. So true and so good. And actually, it makes me think of another quote that I wrote down because you said a lot of really, really powerful things about how this affects children, like how it affected you as a child, and even Max, your child, and how complex that is. Because basically what racism does is it attaches shame to the victim, and then the perpetrator can just like walk away and not even think about it anymore. So it tethers to that most vulnerable person. And you said this, here it is. Just because the church isn't discussing race doesn't mean that our kids aren't aware of the larger public conversation. I thought that was so profound, and it's so important to say, because I can't tell you how many people I have talked to, white people, who are like, oh, it's not even a thing for my kids. Like, they don't even notice if their friends are Black or white. And I'm like,
yeah,
really? Do you see the time that we live in? Like, do they have eyes? And they are out there in this world that's talking about it constantly. And if we're not intentional about talking about it in our churches and our homes, then our children will continue to perpetuate behaviors that attach shame to victims.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think for a lot of parents, I would say this. I had a lot of lovely kids that invited me to a lot of parties when I was a little kid. and called me friend, and on the playground would use a racial slur in the heat of a moment, or say that I couldn't do something because I was Black and they were white. And so you have to understand that your kids have an entirely different interior world that you are not part of. And if you have not discussed it, if you have not been definitive in how you show up in this world for other people groups, your kids come to their own conclusions. It's kind of like your kid can say that, may never tell you that they don't like green peas. They just might leave them on the plate or eat them last, or mix them in with the mashed potatoes and gobble them down. And I'm just saying, kids are very aware of difference. And we all know that, because if you've ever been picked on, had to pick teams, or been in that lineup, that horrible thing happens to all of us in childhood, and you're the last to be picked. Kids figure out reasons to disassociate with people, and also to categorize people. And if you don't believe that race is part of that, then you're not allowing your kid to be fully human and have a fully human experience in this country, where race has been part of one of the most prevalent things about its history. And so, but I think this is true of kids. Kids are it's so easy to explain difference to them. They're so accepting of it once you tell them why a thing is a thing, right? But also, I will say to parents that you also don't know what your kids are getting from other children who may not have the same values that you do. I'll tell a quick story. I have a friend who adopted this gorgeous baby girl from Africa. And when we were on our school campus, Christian school campus back in the day, lovely families, we all are supposed to be loving Jesus and loving neighbors and all that kind of thing. These little kids, pre-K age, actually a little earlier than pre-K, had already, the two little white boys of her friend had already decided that this little Black adopted girl was too different for them to play with. And in fact, not only was she too different, they decided to play this game where they were going to tie her up. They had her at an oak tree and they were pretending to tie her up. And when my friend came over, because her daughter had this look on her face like, oh, that's not good. She does not look like she's having a good time. And the little boy just calmly explained, we're tying her up and we're going to burn her because she's so dark.
Oh my gosh.
Little babies. And then when my friend said to her friend, you really need to address this with our kids, she's like, she was offended and frightened. I don't know where my kids are getting it from. I don't know why they would think that. You know that I'm not like that as a mom. She got on the defensive, and they were carpooling because they had older kids. And then again, it happened where the little boy said that he didn't want to sit next to the little girl because her skin was too dark.
Oh my gosh.
And so this mom, I had this like tea at my apartment in Austin where I asked these moms to come over to see if we could talk about race, like any mom that wanted to. I was in a different space than y'all. I would never open my doors to such an event again, just because the problem with it was your first time coming into my home should not be for me to have to educate you on how to be in my home.
Yeah.
Or how your children should be in my home. And that should not be our first encounter. But I was really trying to, back then, still not knowing a lot, trying to like rationalize, like, how could a kid come to that? We need to talk about all of this.
Yeah.
And it turned out that a lot of kids at that school, including my own, were having these different experiences with race that they weren't talking about at home. They weren't telling their parents the things that were going on at the lunch table or at, in the courtyard when they're playing for recess. They weren't telling all those things. They weren't talking about how this little boy said that this one little Black boy said that his white friends could say the N-word, but all these other people couldn't. And my kid sat there going, well, I don't want them saying the N-word. What about me? Do I get a vote? Yeah. And, and they're rating the beauty of the races, like, at the lunch table, and, they're tying up little girls on trees and saying they're going to burn them. And they're having a whole different experience of racial experience. And a lot of it is because it's just not talked about at home, and it's not talked about in school. And that colorblind mentality, kids will fill in the blank. They will fill in the blank. Believe me, they will fill in the blank. Or like my husband's family, my husband's white and British, there won't be much conversation about race, but then when you bring your Black girlfriend home, suddenly there's a conversation about race. So believe me, that it's not, and my husband honestly was shocked at how his parents have behaved racially towards me at times. Because it's not like, he honestly was like, my parents, with anyone who comes to the door, they're gonna help them. They love everyone. And his parents, his mother in particular, had some very dodgy questions about us getting into a relationship that shocked him and hurt him. But honestly, I was like, well, had you guys ever talked about it growing up? Like, if it's something that never came up when you were growing up, she never expected it, and that was something that I had to tell my kid, that a lot of times if you do get into dating interracially, you have to understand that a lot of times these kids, their parents have an idea of who they're going to bring home. And a lot of times it's not you. Yeah. So, it's trust and believe that your kids are having conversations about race, particularly now with everything that's going on in school districts and Black Lives Matter. They're having conversations. And if you want to know what those conversations are, even at a little age, with little kids, I would say the books that actually discuss race and see what they say when you read them. Go to places to shop where the demographic is different, to see what your children say when they're not the majority dominant race there. Like if you're always going to the Target where everyone looks just like you and it's right there in your neighborhood, go to a Target that serves a Black community or an Asian community or a Latinx community, and see how your children react and allow them to flub it up so that you can make corrections, so that you can course correct, so that you can have open dialogue. It would have saved my life a lot. my little heart as a little kid had parents been a little bit more transparent with their kids when I was a kid.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I'll just add, see how you yourself react when you go into those situations too.
Exactly.
As the adult. Okay. So I have a Black son and a white daughter.
Yeah.
My son is from Ethiopia. Yeah. I was admittedly very naive 10 years ago when
me too. I thought I'll let you tell your story. I thought when we were foster kids, I thought we were the perfect family because we were a mixed race family. I did not know. You just make a lot of assumptions, and I needed to do my own education. I really did. Yeah.
And that's the thing right there that I wanted to point at, was like, we as parents need to do our own work, our own education, but it's been such an interesting experience having one of each, because it's a fact. Like, my son started getting called names in kindergarten.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
he was in fourth grade this past year, got called the N-word at school. It's a
Yeah.
big deal. It's very different from
Mhm.
when you were a kid and it was just ignored. Like now,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
school is required to take it seriously, but even at
Mhm.
that, it took so much advocacy on my part to actually have the school do something that would matter and would
Yeah.
work. But what I noticed most was the offending child's parents' lack of involvement in trying to correct him and the way that he was
Exactly.
thinking. Just think, oh, it
Yeah.
was an innocent mistake. He didn't
Mhm.
know what he was saying. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's a problem. If that's
Yeah.
true, like
Even
even
more
that is a
so.
problem, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So it's very true. I think white parents, a lot of time, we just want to protect our kids from feeling shame.
Right.
And
I
we'll go
think,
to
yeah.
such extraordinary lengths to keep our kid from feeling shame. But I'll tell you, when my son was called a name in front of my daughter and she didn't do anything about it,
Yeah.
we had a conversation about that,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
really hard because it's, I will say with parents, I think the hardest thing is that you're right. We don't want our kids to feel sad or shame. We don't even want them to feel guilt. But what if we didn't look at it like that and we helped our kids to feel more human in the world?
Yeah.
What if we looked at it more like that? Same thing. I saw other kids as a little Black kid. If another Black kid was getting it, I wasn't coming to that kid's rescue. I was glad to have the break myself.
Yeah.
And my friends who were white, who I knew adored me, like we played and we were, if a popular boy said something really mean and nasty to me, they weren't coming to my rescue because they didn't want to be targeted. So
Yeah.
everyone's held hostage in that situation to that racial moment. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of kids do that. So I honestly don't have the answer for how we evolve from that. But one of the things is that if there's open dialogue happening in the schools, one of the reasons why it's so important that we don't have these book bans is
Mm-hmm.
that if teachers are actually able to read about um, gender and race and sexuality in ways that are appropriate for children,
Mm-hmm.
appropriate for age, what it does is it gives kids actual words and actual support when they see their kid. If a kid reads a book about a little kid who is going through racial injustice, and then they go on the playground and someone commits that, it's like, oh no, we don't do that. It's kind of
Right.
like we all grew up on the Berenstain Bears and we were able to say, look, the Berenstain Bears said that was not fair.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing is not, if you're not sharing, you're not caring. We heard, you know what I mean? We
Mm-hmm.
knew how to behave because the Berenstain Bears showed us how to behave, because we had these books that showed us how to treat someone if they were having a bad day, all these things. But if we take that away and we say, no, 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 our kids are never going to have problems with race or problems with someone who is identifying differently in their gender, or their parents are a same-sex couple. Our kids are never going, because our kids aren't paying attention to it. I'm like, kids are wickedly mean. And I remember, just think about if you had siblings, we would go for the thing that we knew. If my sisters made me mad, I went for the
Mm-hmm.
thing that I knew was gonna make them cry. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that thing. Like, well, that's why your head's so big, or whatever it is that are super sensitive about. And that's what kids will do. And I don't think that a lot of kids have this full understanding of what the N word means, or what race is. But what they do know is that it can be used to hurt others.
Mm-hmm.
And why would we not want to teach them not to use that to hurt
Mm-hmm.
other children? Like, why would we not want to do that?
Yeah.
So, and I think it's hard for the parent when your kid's the instigator because you feel so much shame. And I do feel bad for parents who feel that shame. But the only thing that can combat shame is to acknowledge and to grow from and change from that. That's the thing. That's the light that destroys the darkness that shame likes to put up, the cloak that likes to put upon us, is we have to throw the cloak off and say, hey, I own up to it. I need to do better with how my kids are learning. I need to do better with my own education. I don't know why my kids are behaving in this world, but I will say this to white parents and Black parents, because I think a lot of Black parents expect their children to carry too much shame by forgiving the unforgivable. Like, you know that I grew up with that I wasn't supposed to strike back. And so I carried a lot of that weight that I was told to be strong. And so I think one of the things that I would just say to parents is understand that your kids are human. And that humanity begins the very first moment that they take their first breath. It doesn't come later in life. And you don't need to feel shame for your kid being human. And just like they have to learn how to walk, they also have to learn how to be community, how to be neighborly, how to be compassionate. And that isn't going to happen just from you taking them on mission trips. I thought I could just foster kid my way into a very compassionate child, but because we have an only child, so I thought I would bring in all these foster kids and they would be forced to be compassionate. That's not how that works. It takes a lot of time and grooming, and also a lot of, you have to show them how you too fail in these ways. You too have misunderstood.
Yeah.
And we have so much wonderful history. Nowadays, there's just so many resources. There's no reason for it. It's, and your kids are incredibly resilient with shame. I mean, a kid can feel shame one minute and be licking an ice cream cone the next and be just fine. So allow your kids to feel guilt, to feel conviction, to feel empathetic for the things that they've put into the world.
Yeah.
And also pay attention to those little kids. My little kid got sent to the principal's office the first day of school. They're 21 now, but when their first day of school, they got sent to the principal's office because two other kids were fighting, and it upset them so much. They cried so hard and they couldn't calm down that they too had to go to the principal's office because they were so upset that two other kids got into a fight. So let's pay attention to our little empathetic ones too, because those kids have an incredible way of being a little hope in rooms. You know, and I think a lot of times those kids get overshadowed because, you know, so your little kid may have just felt deeply in that moment. And a lot of times when they feel deeply, they see this thing happening to their sibling. It's not that they're condoning it, but they felt it so very deeply. And maybe the question is, what did you feel during that moment? Yeah. What do you wish would have happened? How, you know, and it could be something where they can learn to not necessarily have to speak out because that's difficult for kids that feel deeply, but they can do something like hold their sibling's hand or pat their sibling on the back or cry. And they can show their emotion in a different way. And, you know, and the same with kids that want to side on the side of the bully, who are just scared and just want to be protected. We really do have to just spend a little bit more time with our kids framing and reasoning, because they do have these little interior worlds going inside. And I believe everyone is born to be light in this world and not hate and darkness. But a lot of times that light is never brought fully forward because they spend so much time not being vulnerable. So, but my heart goes out to you. That must have been such a hard moment for you as a mama.
Mostly, I just want to make sure that my kids are okay and they understand what's going on, and they're looking out for each other. But thank you for your wisdom on all of that. I definitely take that to heart personally, and I know that there were so many incredible takeaways from what you just said. And I was looking at the clock and I was like, how is it? Because this conversation has been so rich, and I value and honor your time. So I want to make sure to not keep you for forever, even though I totally could. This conversation has really been wonderful. So thank you so much. And I would love for you to let us know, like, what are the best ways for the listeners to connect with you?
Well, listening to lovely conversations like this is my favorite way for people to get to know me. So thank you for this. If you just put my name into Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can catch some of my interviews, that's great. So I appreciate this one as well. But mostly on Instagram. It's the only social media that I understand. I kind of know how to work it. So that's the Black Coffee White Friends. I have a newsletter called Black Eyed Stories. So you can find me there. Right now, I'm doing this fun thing where I love children's books. I still buy them. My family still loves them, even though my kid's 21. And I've been reading banned children's books. So there's I think there's about 4 or 5 different books that I've read that were just banned children's books. And that's been fun because that's a side gig that I did a long time ago. And I miss being in the company of children and reading books to them. So there's that. But there's also a whole bunch of stuff about race, intersectionality, and faith. And so if you are part of a faith community, particularly if you were raised Christian and you're trying to figure out how race has affected how you view God, I write a lot of stuff about that. There's so much on that. There's spiritual practices. There's lists of books that I bought and that I recommend. It's endless. So that's really one good way of connecting. And you can do that for free. There's also paid subscriptions, but there's a lot on there just for free. So you can sign up for that. And of course, buy the book, Everybody Come Alive, a memoir and essays. And if you buy it and a group of you want to Zoom and talk about the book, just DM me on my Instagram or go to my website. I forgot I do have a website. It's marciealviswalker.com. I forgot all about that. So.
Perfect. Amazing. And I will be sure to include all that info in the show notes too. So if you're listening and you just want to go click on the link, go check out the show notes and connect with Marcie. Thank you again so much for your time. Thank you for this beautiful book. Like I said, I'm going to be telling everyone about it. I'm going to be posting on Instagram about it today. So I'm very grateful for you, for your voice, and for this time. I appreciate you.
I'm grateful for this time too. And what a lovely mother you are. It's beautiful. I just love talking to moms. So
ditto.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, friend. I'll connect with you again soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.